Hi, everybody. It's Greg Johnson. We're back for another edition of Building Bridges with Greg Johnson. This is a podcast that is dedicated to advancing healthy dialogue between people that have different opinions about important spiritual things. We hope you're enjoying the podcast. This is our fifth podcast since we began Building Bridges. We have our weekly supplemental video blog that also kind of undergirds the focus of our podcast, and so we hope you'll check those out as well. Obviously, we love to feel like you like our videos and our podcast, so please like, and then if you'd be so kind as to share or certainly subscribe, that helps us out as we build our audience. Very excited that the manuscript, the Bridge book, which I've been working on, has been edited, and all the edits have been reviewed, and so now we're moving into that final phase of getting a publisher and working towards publication date. So if you're interested in the book, if you're interested in Evangelical Mormon Dialogue, that certainly is going to be, I think, a great testimony to a lot of cool things that God's been doing over the last 20, 25 years. And so we're very excited about that. And as we build the Building Bridges audience, we hope that that will help launch our book and really give us a great opportunity to share all the things that God has allowed us to do as a work that's been trying to build this bridge between the LDS community and the evangelical community. The topic for today's podcast is kind of unique, and it's in progress because every spring we are privileged as an organization to host visiting evangelical college students from places like Azusa Pacific University and Westmont College, Biola University, University of Mobile, Mars Hill College Ministry from Mobile, Alabama. And they come in and they build bridges to their Latter-day Saint student friends. And so we're going to talk about the program itself. We're going to kind of get some perspective on a student who's been here a couple times and also meet a student that has just been here. So if you're listening on iTunes, or Spotify, or checking it out on YouTube, we welcome you to the program once again. And let me introduce Colin to my far right,
yes,
and
sir. Good to be here.
Quentin right here to my immediate right. Welcome, Quentin.
Thank you.
You are the newer college student. You are the returning college student and one of the two team leaders.
So they say.
Yeah. You are from Colorado Springs, Colin, and you are from
Puyallup, Washington.
There you go.
Yeah.
Say that 3 times fast. Anyways, guys, I'm really excited to have you. We have the other students from APU that are here this week, right behind us in our audience. And so I hope this is a fun conversation for listeners to the Building Bridges with Greg Johnson podcast, because this is certainly a critical, important, super exciting, wonderful part of the Mormon Evangelical Dialogue. And for our viewers and listeners' sake, we began this work 17 years ago when we brought a group of students from Colorado Christian University under the leadership of a student leader by the name of Eric McHenry, who would later come on to our staff at Standing Together. We went on to BYU's campus, got permission to have a meeting. The student body officers hosted us, and so we had Colorado Christian University and BYU, and we had the first ever student dialogue. And it went so well that they basically said that we could come back every year and as often as we wanted to facilitate this conversation. So you guys are year number 17. You've been here 2 years prior, but you guys are a part of a longer, larger legacy of students who have been talking to students. So we'll kind of just have this a free-floating conversation, but let me just ask you, Colin, you're a student leader at APU. This is your third year to Utah. I'm going to ask you a question I'm going to follow up with Quentin, but when you first heard about a student group from APU in Southern California, the LA area, coming to Utah during spring break, why were you even interested?
Yeah, so originally I was just kind of looking for something to fill, my spring break. APU does a lot of ministry to Mexico, to the Mexicali region, but wasn't really feeling like God had called me there. So I saw the listing for Utah, saw that they did interfaith dialogue with LDS students up in Utah, and I had a best friend back in high school who dated an LDS member, and the way that they kind of sort of broke things off, because they kind of got to a point in their relationship where if they were going to go further, if they were going to make things more serious and more for the future, I guess, then they had to come to more of a consensus within their faith. But within trying to do that, became very tension-filled, very angry, very bitter. And
a lot of conflict.
Yeah. And seeing the way that kind of split the two of them, split the friendship that they had for 3-4 years, I was like, maybe there's a better way to do this.
I appreciate that. I'm going to make a quick comment on the tail end of your answer because, frankly, historically, and you can go way back. I mean, Mormonism starts in 1830, but, being raised in the Mormon faith myself and then coming out of the Mormon faith as an evangelical when I was 14, I learned very quickly in the early 1980s, before you guys were born. I know that it's kind of weird, but it's amazing that life is moving on so quickly. But anyways, in the 80s, I realized that there really was a kind of hostility. Now, I was aware of that on the LDS side as well. I'd even come to General Conference as a young Latter-day Saint, and I saw those people passing out tracts and saying that the Mormon Church was a cult and that we were going to hell, and we were kind of scurried away from those weird people, those mean people. So I knew it from that side. But when I became an evangelical, I realized there was just a kind of a full-fledged get the Mormons, argue the Mormons, defend the faith. They're villains. I mean, they're deceivers. They're the missionaries and all the whole 9 yards. And during that time, a lot of materials were created that were pretty antagonistic. Probably the most famous or infamous even would be the Godmakers film that showed for well over 10 years. And certain personalities like Walter Martin going back, his book, The Kingdom of the Cults, where Mormonism and other religious groups that were talked about in that book. And I think as you move through the 80s and into the 90s, there's a lot of that. Yeah. But near the end of the 90s and into the 2000s, as I was, coming to Utah and establishing myself as a younger pastor, we really understood that things had to change. That the antagonism, the confrontation, the in-your-face stuff. Now that does happen still, but there are many who feel like that's not productive, that's not effective. And so you had an experience knowing a friend, dating a girl or guy, which one, whatever the relationship was, and they broke off because of religious questions and incompatibility, and then it turned the relationship pretty negative. It sounds like, yeah. And so your awareness of that. I don't know. Did you know Connor Lott, who was the student leader then, or did you just get to know him during that part?
No. First meeting was the first time I met him.
Yeah. So, yeah, and he was a great guy who also had personal experiences with Latter-day Saints and just had a desire to do something that would be more positive, more faith-affirming, more, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but not affirming of the doctrines of Mormonism, being very aware of the distinctions, but also having some ability to, to kind of have a conversation rather than an argument, a debate, a dialogue rather than a debate, as we like to say. So Quentin, that's how he kind of got on the bus and started coming to Utah every spring break. Now you're a junior at APU, right? Sophomore. Okay, good. Future leader right here. So you heard about it sometime this year, randomly probably. And what were your first, or maybe you heard about it last year? Oh, you have a friend, I think, that went. Yeah.
Yes,
Tell us your story.
Our friend Candace just kind of said that it'd be something I would be interested in, and she was right. So I went to one of the meetings that we have every Monday, and yeah, I liked the people in the group, and the meetings were super interesting. So I just kept going to those.
And did you have any personal background with Latter-day Saints, Mormon friends, or anything like that?
I mean, no, none that really informed like me joining the group or anything. But my mom was Mormon for a couple of years before I was born. But that's just more of a fun fact than a personal experience.
Yeah. It didn't generate any kind of particular burden or question. Okay. And were you drawn to it? Why did your friend think that you would like this kind of an experience? What about you?
I don't really know, but I mean, I'm a biblical studies major.
Okay.
So like I have a bit of a passion for like interfaith dialogue to begin with.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think just beliefs of all kinds are really fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe speaking for him in talking with Candace as well, I think one of the things that she saw in him was sort of the ability both to think deeply, think spiritually, to understand doctrine and the nuances that come within it, but then also to be able to relate, to be personable, and to kind of combine those two in a way that really flows.
Colin, I think you both are kind of lending some thoughts to this. Building Bridges with Greg Johnson, this podcast and these video blogs are really about trying to create a movement of thinking people to say, hey, What's the most effective, most God-honoring way to build this conversation? And I think what you just said is very, very helpful because it really it kind of takes a both-and personality. You can be a really nice person, but not be that intellectually interested, curious even. I mean, you can be really a wonderful, hospitable, kind, loving, friendly person, but if you really don't like to talk about doctrine or faith or have a burden for people's spiritual understanding of things, you're a great person, but you're probably not, kind of set for this experience. On the other hand, you can be very knowledgeable. Know doctrine, know the LDS doctrine, know the evangelical doctrine, have a burden for people, have a passion for it. But if your demeanor is one of antagonism and kind of spiritual pride and kind of what we often refer to on our podcast and in our culture here and in our ministry is this whole concept of kicking over the beehive. And I'll explain that for those that are listening. The beehive is the symbol of the state of Utah. That was Brigham Young's commitment and idea, and he wanted to engage the culture of Utah under his leadership here in our state, that this would be like a communal living place where the bees work together effectively and everybody knew their role and everybody knew their assignment and everybody did it without question and just made Utah this desert place that they had arrived to, this high desert that's snowing today, but this high desert as we're recording. But anyways, that whole idea of being busy as a bee is kind of a part of this culture. And sometimes what we find is evangelicals from out of the state, they come on a missions trip, they come to talk with Latter-day Saints, they come to do ministry in Utah or whatever. They have a tendency, and they don't mean to, honestly, they don't mean to. They don't we just want to make people mad. No, they don't think that way. But in essence, by the way they approach people, the confrontational style, the kind of the spiritual antagonistic approach, they kick over the beehive. Obviously, bees don't like having their beehive kicked over, and they get mad, and they leave a week later or 2 weeks later or whatever. And the evangelicals that live right here in Utah have to face the reputation that's created by those people. And so then we have to deal with angry bees. So one of the things that goes back to the very beginning of the Evangelical Mormon Student Dialogue in 2003 was I told visiting students, if you're going to come here, you have to help us. You can't hurt us. You can't make it harder to live here in Utah as a non-Latter-day Saint evangelical, because if you come here and kick over the beehive, you make life harder for us. And I'm talking like our kids. I have 4 children ranging from 23 down to 14. My children have faced religious challenge and dating and social relationships and school relationships that they were just the odd kids because they weren't a part of the majority religious culture. But things have changed so much clearly over the last 20, 30 years. And I think you guys and your generation of students and those who have come before have really significantly contributed to that. So you guys, in the past and presently got connected, got interested. So Colin, tell me a little bit from your perspective as a student leader, when you meet or start meeting in the school year, you meet, months before to form a team, and your team intentionally is about 10. That's your school's design is, because Utah's not the only place that APU goes. You just mentioned Mexicali and some other locations. Most of them are during the summer though, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyways, you're at one of the unique spring break trips, and that's ideal for us because, you're coming here to engage students while they're still in school, and that's great. So as you begin to have meetings, what are you talking about? Why are you meeting? How's that helpful before you arrive in Utah?
Yeah, I think an important distinction to make, at least on our end, is we have both an interfaith dialogue club, and then we have the trip itself. So we had meetings that go sort of all year round that are geared towards more of our local ministry, and then we had trip preparation in and of itself. So our trip preparation this year, we changed it a little bit, but what it was is we had 3 main sessions, one being Christian church history. We took our members through sort of Acts all the way through what the church looks like today, which really sort of ended at the Reformation because there wasn't a lot of big stuff after that we had thought. But then the second one was more of the deeper theological things. Obviously, you can only go over so much theology in a 2.5, 3 hour session, but things like grace, the Trinity, salvation, just kind of the big things. And then the third one is we just kind of opened up the floor to any questions that our members had about the LDS faith, and then we also walked them through the plan of salvation from their end and just kind of compared the two to look at the differences there.
Yeah. Now, do you talk amongst your students, returning students as well as the new students, about the philosophy and the methodology, the style in which we come?
Yeah. I guess I hadn't mentioned that because that was kind of sort of woven in throughout all the meetings that we did. But the culture, I guess the two biggest things that we emphasize being, and I feel like you've probably talked about them as well, convicted civility and then holy envy.
Yeah.
And that really being more the posture of our heart.
Yeah, we have talked about that on this podcast and shared those very important ideas that we can be both convicted and civil. And I think the reason that we're doing this particular topic on the podcast for this month, for the month of March, is that not only are you guys here during this time, I mean, right now as you're here, Biola University has 20 students here. Next week we'll have Westmont College, we'll have the Mobile, Alabama group. And I think maybe a lot of our LDS listeners, and I think we have a lot of those, and a lot of evangelical listeners maybe know roughly about this or might have heard that this is happening, but they don't really know a lot about it, and they don't know the depth to which you guys come and are prepared and ready to love and build friendships and learn and respect and show that interest. So, as you were hearing about that, Quentin, was that like a positive thing, or were you like kind of concerned that maybe this was too just social based, or how did you, the methodology, were you able to come on board quickly and say that's what I want to be a part of, or were you like, hey, how's this really getting into the differences, and how are we really going to influence our LDS friends if we don't really get make it all about doctrine?
No, it's super like that. I think that's definitely the way to go. I was talking to Ian earlier too. How
Ian is one of your team leaders and students.
How because we did one of the local conversations, one of the local dialogues, and it was very conversational. Colin and I were at the same table, and it was really just more like, oh, you believe that, like here's what we believe on that topic. Super great, it's super nice, but it also opens up, that's what opens up the opportunity to really dig into those deep theological concepts. If you just go straight out the gate trying to talk about that stuff, people get put on the defensive.
It makes a lot of sense, I mean, to me, but again, I want those that are listening to hear this too. So if your group, if you as students back in Azusa and back in the LA area were to go onto an institute campus or go to a local LDS ward house and just show up and say, we want to pass out these anti-Mormon tracts, and we want to go toe-to-toe with your best and brightest, we want to have a debate with you, what would you guess would be the reception that you would receive?
I mean, it wouldn't be a good one. I think one of the things that we talked about too is like putting ourselves in their position. Like what would we do if someone came up to us, came on our campus and started talking about how Christian doctrine was heresy, about how we were the ones going to hell, about how we were just these crazy lunatics. Like we would put up our walls, we'd go back further into our own beliefs, and we wouldn't want to hear anything that they had to say. We wouldn't have that bridge building conversation.
I refer to that as a process that brings a lot of heat but not much light. There's not much understanding that emerges from that. A lot of angry tension. Tempers go up. But I think, and again, you said so well, the idea that if Mormon missionaries just showed up on Biola's campus or Westmont campus, that they would get noticed. Probably, some students would engage, and maybe they would be the ones that really want to get into it and do the brawl. But at some point, maybe campus security would show up or something and say, this is a private campus. You can't bring your theology here. You can't be witnessing on our campus. And they'd be asked to leave. And you know what? That's how evangelical college students showing up at BYU or at Institutes of Religion were treated prior to 2003 and even after that with certain groups, because that's their property. They have a right to say thank you, but no thank you. You're not welcome here if you're just going to punch us in the eye or do some kind of stealth evangelism or secret evangelism and try to act like a friend, but then, nail us or something. So that's very important to say, that what we wouldn't appreciate, certainly our Latter-day Saint friends wouldn't appreciate either. Proverbs says it well in the book of Proverbs in the Bible, the Old Testament, chapter 18 says, "A brother offended." Now, even if you don't consider a Latter-day Saint, an evangelical brother, sister, whatever lingo, the concept is a close friend, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city. So we have to be careful about that. So very, very cool concept there that you were able to say that. So what I love about the fact, and I don't know how this goes back to Connor's leadership or you and Ian's leadership, but you locally decided to step into conversations with a local institute right there in Azusa. How did that all start?
I think, like you had said, it kind of started with Connor, and there's a much longer story, so to run you through it quickly, it all kind of started the first year that Ian and I, and then Connor as well, came. Ian and I's freshman year. It was probably a conversation that happened at like 3 a.m, and it was just this brainstorming of how can we take the principles and the way that we did dialogue here in Utah, and how can we take that back to APU and really influence our culture there. And at that point, we were, probably due to lack of sleep, very big picture kind of thinking like, let's go and change America's culture. Let's take this dialogue style to politics. Let's take it to more religions than just Christian.
By the way, I love that.
Yes.
I love that about you guys.
Which I think Ian would agree that still is something that is burning inside of us. And I think it's going to be a longer term project, not necessarily something we get done in our undergraduate.
But in the age of Trump and the politics of today and the religious divide of today, wouldn't convicted civility really be a blessing and help many different communities make some progress verbally and conversationally? I think so.
We had that conversation, came back to APU. Connor graduated that fall, I believe it was. So that fall was really him grandfathering the program over to Ian and I. And I think within that, he was instilling this culture, was instilling his ideas of what he wanted to do. But I guess then in terms of local ministry, that didn't really pick up until this past summer. I was here doing some summer school here.
In LA?
In LA, yep. Mm-hmm. I'm not in APU anymore.
Okay.
So Ian and I were both there for the summer. We reached out, I think just on LDS.org, to request some missionaries, started talking with them, and then slowly sort of built our way up the chain of command to the institute.
That's not far from APU.
Correct.
It's really close by.
Yeah.
And so they knew who you guys were, at least your school,
Yeah, we were invited to a pool party with Brother Chang, and Ian went. I was unable to go, but Ian made the relationship there, and kind of from there, just kind of kept reaching out to him and building that relationship so that these sort of monthly dialogues that we have are something that's more sustainable.
So right now, APU Monthly has an interaction down in the LA area that goes throughout the school year?
That would be correct.
Yeah, that is so cool. Yeah. And, again, guys, you just nailed it. You nailed it again. It's about relationship. Yeah. We tend to allow ourselves to judge people and put them into boxes, don't we? Where, okay, they're a liberal, they're a conservative, they're a Calvinist, they're a free will guy, they're this or they're that. And so it's very convenient. Now, I think humanly speaking, that's just normal, and we do that. I mean, you segment people, you divide people. I'm not trying to undo the reality of how we think of categories. Yeah. But I think if we only stay there and don't let people get out of those boxes and realize that we're not monolithic, we have many different perspectives and engaging that. So when you stepped into the experience and had the opportunity right there in APU to do something locally in preparation for here, but also kind of not just in preparation, but to do real dialogue there, was that a pretty cool opportunity for you? What was that
awesome.
like? Yeah,
it was awesome. It was great. Yeah, the people we talked to, I think I told Colin, like after we were done, I was like, I just want to hang out with those people. Yeah. It's like just to hang out with them. Like they were really cool. Like, and it's, it's this idea of, when you actually get to know them, you realize you have a lot more in common than you think.
I think that's, yet again, we've talked about relationship building, talked about understanding things from another person's perspective. Mm-hmm. Third thing is, as you get to know people, that relationship becomes just as special, We talked about in a recent video blog about the concept that Dr. John Stackhouse writes about in his book, Humble Apologetics. Sometimes we're so determined to win an argument that we lose the friendship.
Yeah.
And we don't even care about the friendship. And that says something about people who follow a Savior who said that I love the world. I died for the world, For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever would believe in him. And Jesus invites us to follow him, to come and come alongside of him, and he affirms and he forgives and he restores and he heals. And yet sometimes we are kind of leading with, the clipboard in hand and the doctrinal list and say, okay, let's have an interview before we can have a relationship. Yeah. Let's have a relationship before we have the interview. And let the relationship open the door to the interview. And it's never an interview, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And can I ask you both something? Because I think one of the criticisms that Stand Together can be nailed with and given a little bit is the whole area of, doesn't this, this is nice, kumbaya. Oh, the Mormons and the evangelicals are getting along together. Yeah. They like each other. They're having barbecues together. They're going to pool parties. But truth is being thrown right out the window. The differences, the doctrinal distinctions, the concern, the burden for the difference idea, that's just forsaken. How would you guys respond to the idea? Is this just some relational thing with no emphasis on doctrinal conversations, or does it bring out opportunities for both?
You go first.
I can go first.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you forget that it's the grace of God that changes a person's heart, that can be an issue. It's not rational arguments that ultimately do the changing. Some people's hearts are influenced, like ultimately, by the rational arguments and stuff like that. But it's the grace of God, and I think the grace of God shows itself. It's a lot easier to incarnate the grace of God through that nice relationship, the kindness and humility, rather than the clipboard metaphor that you use.
Yeah. All right. Your comments on that?
I think when you asked that question, I was taken aback by the criticism in the first place. It was one of our members on the trip, like in some of our preparations, one of the questions that we sort of prep with is like, why, taking a step back, coming to Utah, being in the dialogue, you'll get people that'll ask you from the LDS side, so like, why are you guys here? Why are you doing this? And one of our members' answers there is to find truth, to discover truth, to keep pursuing truth. So to me, it's not that we're throwing truth out the window. We're taking these ideas of relationship, we're taking the things that we know, and we're combining them to take a step deeper into what it is that we believe. And I think one of the things that goes along with that in just dialogue in general is if you believe that you have the truth, then you shouldn't be afraid of stepping into into a dialogue, into a conversation with someone else who says that they have the truth. Because at the end of the day, if you want the truth and they have the truth and you're wrong, then great, you're going to believe what they believe. But if you have the truth and they don't, and you can get them to believe the truth, then especially as a follower of Christ, that's just so much more the better.
Okay, man, you're hired. You can join Standing Together because you are on board. Both of you are on board. All of you are on board. And and that's why I'm so passionate about this. Yeah. It's not easy to organize 4 different trips in 2 different weeks.
Oh, yeah.
With, 8 institutes, BYU, General Authority, and we do the whole 9 yards during this week. These students will meet with institutes of religion, probably 3 different dialogues on institute campuses. They'll be at BYU. You'll meet with the General Authority. You'll be on Temple Square. It's a full immersion. Yeah. And again, it's a very important thing you just said. Like, Latter-day Saint students will ask you, why did you choose to do this with your spring break? Why didn't you go party? Why didn't you go hang out at the beach or whatever? They don't party. I shouldn't have said it that way. I'm sorry. Okay. Why don't you go hang out on the beach or whatever? And you guys are here on mission. You guys are here because you love the LDS people. You're here to learn. You're here to grow. You're here to share. And that's a powerful thing. And being able to share that when asked and know why you're here is very critical. So that conversation about the value of this being not only relationship developing and affirming, but also authentic conversations are also part of that, intentional conversations. Because actually, just like you said, I can go back to relationships with BYU scholars or religious leaders and say, hey, I don't suppose, and we want to kind of begin to wrap this up, I don't suppose that all of my knowledge about God, which is pretty finite anyways. I mean, on a big white piece of paper, probably a dot would be my knowledge compared to all of the infinite mind of God. Yeah. And that would be being very optimistic about my knowledge. But if my dot is what I know about God, do I suppose, am I so arrogant as to think that everything I believe about God is right? Am I not going to stand before God? I believe, as a follower of Jesus who has accepted his grace and love him and believe I'm going to heaven. If I stand before God and if he says, I cannot believe it, Greg, you're the one human being that everything you believed about me was 100% correct.
Yeah.
You get a star or something. You get a better mansion or whatever. No, I'm not. There's no mindset that I have that would make me think that. So if I could be wrong about some or much of what I believe, then that brings me to a place of humility. Yeah. And I offer that to my Latter-day Saint friend. If your faith can help me understand God better, I'm all for that because all truth is God's truth. Amen. I'm not afraid of truth. Let's go for it. And let's not go for it as enemies. Let's go for it as friends. Yeah. Let's go hand in hand. I mean, it's not about you win and I lose, or I win and you lose. Let's win together. Yeah. Let's pursue truth. Let's pursue God. And if God takes us this direction, let's follow him. If he takes us this direction, let's follow him. Because we're not just gonna, be wearing the campus t-shirt and say, we love our school better than, your school. So that is so important to this dialogue. And that's what students have been doing. That's what scholars have been doing. That's what leaders like Ravi Zacharias and Elder Jeffrey Holland have been doing. These key leaders are showing us that what you've been doing for, 17 years, not just obviously you guys, but those who have come before. I can even share this, I think, publicly. I did have the privilege of having a dinner, my wife and I, with Ravi Zacharias and his wife, Margie, and Jeffrey Holland and his wife, Pat, in December. And one of the questions I asked Elder Holland, who's a Mormon apostle, one of the senior Mormon apostles, is in all of what you've learned about and experienced in the Mormon Evangelical Dialogue of the last 20-plus years, what do you think are some of the key values or the one of the first things that Elder Holland mentioned? He goes, I think what you do with the university students is absolutely critical. He said the fact that students have been meeting with each other for years and developing relationships, even though it's not hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands, but it's 10, 20 at a time, both sides meeting together in houses and in institutes and BYU campus, building. I mean, you guys will meet with Elder Paul Johnson of the First Quorum of 70, the Commissioner of Education. Latter-day Saints don't get that opportunity. I had an institute professor tell me this week, how do you get your students in with our general authorities? How come our students can't come? I mean, he wasn't just jealous. He was like a little upset, a little irritated. Like, can we come with you? I said, I'm sorry, man. I don't make the rules, But it's a really big deal. I mean, evangelicals don't even get that, frankly. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we all got to go have lunch with Ravi Zacharias or name your favorite evangelical, big shot, we'd be pretty like, that'd be pretty cool. Go hang out with Francis Chan one day or something like that. That'd be kind of cool for us. But, meeting with the general authority in the LDS world is a pretty cool opportunity. So I'm going to, let's just kind of wrap this up. One more question to both of you, and we'll kind of bring a closing statement. So what are you most excited about, or what are you anticipating for this week as you come to Utah, the first week of March 2020? You're going to be engaging in dialogue. You're going to be at Cedar City. You're going to be in Orem. You're going to be in Salt Lake City. What are you looking forward to?
You can go first.
Good, great.
There's so much on my mind. I'm still processing.
Yeah. Man, I'm excited for a lot of things. I think obviously the dialogues are the big things. Yeah. And I'm just, I've heard rumors of 6-hour plus dialogues going on, and just the opportunity to
usually about 3 hours. But
yeah. But
sometimes we close the places down.
Just the opportunity to learn and relate with someone of a different faith. For that long and that intricately, it's just really, I'm excited for that.
Yeah. Quentin, I'm going to tell you something, and I'll tell this to the LDS friends because we always hear it. As an evangelical Christian follower of Jesus, your faith is enhanced. I'm telling you, you're knowing what you believe better, being able to articulate it, comparing it with a counter perspective, that has the potential of really deepening your walk with God and your understanding of what you believe in too. So there's the gift that they're going to give you, and that you're going to give them?
I think just to be able to be in conversation about something that means so much. I think, like you had mentioned earlier, like this is a conversation of eternal significance. Like this is our faith, our religion is something that is in every fiber of who we are as both evangelicals and as members of the LDS Church. And I think, again, bringing it back to relationship, looking at my life outside of these dialogues, a lot of the relationships that I've had longevity, that have been the most formative to me, have been people that I have come to and have opened up about the things that I care about the most. So I think it's such a unique opportunity to be able to start a relationship with someone at the foundation of something that means so much, and seeing then where that relationship is able to go.
Very cool. Well, I want you guys to know, and those that are behind the camera to know, that we are very grateful. I think Salt Lake Christian Center was blessed today to hear from you a little bit. I think when I had several of the adults come up to me and say, "I'm so excited that they're here. It's so cool that they come." So you're a blessing to the body of Christ here in Utah. You're going to be a blessing to the LDS community that you engage with. Dr. Bennett, Dr. Bennett, has a sad thing, and his wife's sister passed away, and so they can't be with us on Tuesday, but they opened up their Thursday to host Biola. You guys will be there Monday night. They literally don't want to miss out on you guys because you are such a positive, fresh experience for them, and they have done this for years now, opening their home, providing dinner, and then bringing students together in their home. So love the fact that Dr. Bennett and his wife Pat do that. And I just want more and more of our audience, the Building Bridges with Greg Johnson audience, to know that this stuff is going on, that God's doing a cool thing, that this is worth sharing. This isn't just a Mormon evangelical thing. I mean, that's maybe the example that we use because it's kind of the focus, but it can really go beyond that. It can really be a dialogue that you can have with your atheist friend, your Muslim friend, your liberal friend, your conservative friend, whatever the faith or cultural issue is. Convicted civility, building relationships, approaching it with the right perspective, building relationships, having authentic conversations. That's what Building Bridges is all about. So, hey, we hope that you've enjoyed the program. Hopefully you'll share it with others. Maybe these students will share it with some of their friends, and we'll get a bunch of people to pick up on that. That'd be cool. So check us out on our Facebook page. You certainly check us out on Instagram, but particularly YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. Like, share, and subscribe. We're so grateful. This podcast is committed to advancing conversations and dialogues between people with different opinions and helping that process go better and better. So we'll see you next month as we bring back another episode of this podcast. And in between, we'll see you week to week with the video blogs. Thanks so much for listening in.